Hey everybody, welcome to week 13. Congratulations, you only have 4 weeks left to go of the class. Can you believe it? You've made it this far and your concert report is turned in, so I'm sure that that's a big weight off of your shoulders. It usually takes me a couple of weeks to get all of those graded, so don't be looking right away for those grades. I try to get your homework assignments done within a few days, but these take me a little while. Probably be working on them over the Thanksgiving break. So yeah, just hang tight on those. I guarantee you'll know how you did on them before the end of the class. Not that it should matter. I'm sure you're all doing amazing, and you'll be just fine. So I'm sure it's a weight off, and that's great. This week is a single module week. You will have one more week with 2 modules. That'll be the following week, but it's a little bit shorter. You've got funk and disco and rap, and that's the shorter materials. This one's a little bit longer. And remember, when you're watching these and going through the online materials, I put all sorts of videos. A lot of them are short, and it's important to watch them to help get the context. Some I put are longer, and you can sort of figure those out as you will. The other thing I recommend is getting those playlists going and listening to it while you're going through the material. You know, open up another tab and work through or whatever. So yeah, that is that. So the big thing you want to be mindful of is the end of the class. You'll have the test 3 and all of those things, but that's still a little ways away. So this week, you're going to learn about punk and new wave. And punk and new wave both have their roots in rock, of course. But then, of course, there's other influences that go into those. With punk really is an American creation, although the Sex Pistols from England took it to a whole new level. But when you have bands like the Stooges and the MC5 and the Velvet Underground and the New York Dolls, they're really informing this style of music, and there's a really important club to sort of foster the scene, actually both in punk and new wave, which was a club in New York called CBGB. So you're going to learn about that, and it was an interesting little place. It was this sort of biker, wino, Hells Angels bar, where they had drug addicts and prostitutes and all these people hung out. But the owner basically was like, yeah, we don't care if you do music here. And so they were able to sort of develop in their own way, in their own time, and not be having to be shoved into the sort of big corporate landscape. So I want you to be mindful as you're going through this chapter, when you're starting to learn about stuff in 75, 76, 77, that at this same time, the Beatles are gone as a band, but The Who is still around, the Stones are still around, Pink Floyd are still around, Queen is around and at the top of the game, Fleetwood Mac, Peter Frampton. So it's always interesting to keep track of, well, who are the popular ones? And like I said, way back at the beginning of the class, one of the things that we're interested in with this class is who are the game changers, who changed the course of music history. Sometimes we know that at the time. We knew when Elvis came out, and I wasn't alive then, but people knew, hey, this is a major shift, right? The Beatles, same thing. People knew in that time, hey, something major is going on here. But there were other things happening as well, and sometimes it takes some distance to sort of see how those things are realized. And so by the time you get to 75, 76, you get the Ramones, which is doing this sort of fast, energetic music, and the band Television, and Patti Smith, and all these folks. They're creating this whole new sound and this whole new sort of subject matter, which is coming from the streets. We saw some of that with glam rock and people like Lou Reed, that he left after he left Velvet Underground. And so the subject matter is very different. And they may be talking about, more harsher realities, or they may be having, a sort of dark sense of humor or a light sense of humor. And you see a lot of that in new wave as well. So punk kind of starts to develop and take off. And then the Rolling Stones, the Sex Pistols, in 1976 sort of take what they heard from the New York Dolls and the Ramones, and they created this sound and they politicized this sound with what was going on over in England at the time, which is that they were having a very serious recession. A lot of young people were out of work. There was garbage strikes. Things were pretty bad. And there really was, for a lot of these young people, no future. They did not see any way out. It wasn't like, hey, I went to school and then I got a degree and then I got a job. A lot of them, there were no jobs out there. So a lot of them were squatting in empty flats, empty sort of tenements and all that. And so the Sex Pistols come along with this roar of anger when they're singing songs, you know, singing like No Future and God Save the Queen and Anarchy in the UK. They really were coming out of a point of hopelessness. And there's some other things about the Sex Pistols in terms of their starting with Malcolm McLaren, who was a savvy businessman, who was a fashion designer and sort of realized that it would be to his advantage to have a band that wore what he designed. So there's a little bit more to it than that. So what happened was that the beginnings of punk came out of the United States. It reached a whole new level in the UK with bands, like I mentioned, the Sex Pistols, but also the Damned and the Clash and other folks like that. And then they toured here in 78, and the Sex Pistols, by the way, didn't even last like around 2 years. They were come and gone between 76, 78. They toured in the United States. That was the end of the band. Shortly after that, Sid Vicious was arrested for the murder of his girlfriend, and then he OD'd and died, and it's a really tragic story. If any of you have seen the movie Sid and Nancy, that's that story. But this whole scene then started to take off, which was very high energy. Punk in the States didn't necessarily start off as a very anti-establishment. It was a really mixed bag, but it became that way. And the book looks at, and I help augment a little bit, particularly the West Coast scene. So bands like Black Flag, the Circle Jerks, the Germs, X, we talk about those bands. And then a little bit about like the Bad Brains in DC. And you'll get a little bit of that, and then some stuff later with the how did I just blank on the movement? The I want to say skinhead, but it's not straight edge movement. Thank you. So you'll learn a little bit about that. And I said thank you, but there's nobody else in the room with me. So it came to mind, and then you can learn about New Wave. And New Wave came up at the same time as punk, really got started with Devo in 1975 and into 76. And New Wave was very different. You know, some of the punk folks like Johnny Rotten, John Lydon said, you know, oh, Devo's punk, New Wave is just watered down punk, but it was a different thing altogether. Typically with punk bands, a lot of them, they didn't know how to play when they started. And it was really more about the language and what was being said and the anger of it. With New Wave, you had a lot more musicality involved, people that could play. You get very clean production. You get, you'll get horns, saxophone, you'll get keyboards, synthesizers. You'll get people singing in more robotic voices like Devo or like Gary Newman, or affected voices like the Talking Heads. You get all sorts of things, but there's a little bit more of a pop sensibility to that. So you'll learn about that as well. So that is this chapter. Not everybody likes the punk stuff, but it really influenced a lot of modern rock. And so without that, you wouldn't even have bands like the Chili Peppers, and you wouldn't have bands like Nirvana. And there's all sorts of stuff that came through there. So that is this week. Enjoy it. Finish strong. We got 4 weeks to go. This is a pretty straight ahead week. So just take care, do good work, and we will talk soon. Cheers.